Welcome to an Invictus special tour of the RSI Polaris. It is finally in the game, if only for a flyby or on the show floor for now. But in this video I will walk around the ship, especially look at the top that you can't reach in the Invictus Hall. Also at the very end after the tour I will include a short animation to show off all the moving parts and especially the moving engines of the ship. I'm looking at this in VR, which obviously won't translate to the final video, but it will give me a very different feeling for how big this is. And I will try to communicate how the size of this thing feels and point out things that stand out. There's no interior for now, and unlike the Galaxy I have not recreated that for today. But I will try to show off some of the moving parts that you can't currently see in the expo, and we might have a small peek into the hangar as well. Alright, while we're still at the front, let's start with something insignificant, but still impressive. The headlight under the cockpit there. That is 2.6 meters wide. Imagine being blinded by a light bigger than a door. I get to the cockpit later, but there are also the 4 torpedo hatches next to it, as well as more rocket launchers on the top. But let's start with the overall size. In the files, this is currently 166 meters long. There were different numbers leaked, but this ship, as you see it right now, is 166 meters long, which is only 11 meters longer than in the concept, so just a 7% increase. It is 72 meters wide when it landed, but 81.5 meters when all wings are folded out, and 69 meters high without landing gear in the expanded engine form. We have 7 turrets on the ship, but keep in mind that their sizes are based on data mined numbers. I would not count on them being correct, but right now there seems to be one man turret with S5 hardpoints here, and 2 identical ones on the top just above. Then a remote turret with 4 S4 mounts in the back on the underside, a remote rocket launcher above in the top back, also S4, and then 2 more manned S5 turrets, these ones having quad mounts though, and they are hidden, I'll show you in a second. But first have a look at the docking collar up there, also hidden behind the panel. There's a symmetrical one on the opposite side, unlike the concept where it was at the top. And here are the hidden turrets. That looks quite cool, even though hiding or protecting those turrets might not be that useful. And the mechanism takes a considerable amount of space on the inside. But as you can see, this ship with all its little winglets and control surfaces tries really hard to look aerodynamic, so while it's technically useless in space, in atmosphere it's a cool feature to clean up your silhouette and improve the aerodynamic. Right before it, right here, we have the cargo bay with ramps on both sides to carry ground vehicles. The doors themselves are 17 meters wide and 6 meters high. I don't want to go too deep into speculating what it can fit, because I have not properly rebuilt the interior, but I would assume it should be able to carry any vehicle currently in the game, except maybe a Nova, because of the angle. Even though purely height-wise it should fit through the door too. You can also see that some of the animated parts don't fit yet. Sorry about that. This ship is very detailed, more detailed than any other ship in game I would say. And there's so much stuff that it is hard to see what is important and what is decorational only. For example, these cylindric shapes there, I first took them for backfiring thrusters, or maybe even more missile launchers, but according to the files it is just decorational. I was also looking for an entrance lift beside the ramp, which in the concept was behind the first landing gear, but it looks like that was replaced by these VTOL thrusters. While there are now these 2 panels in the front, interestingly, the left one is labelled as entrance hatch, while the right one is labelled as front hatch static, so maybe only one is functional and the other panel is for symmetry only. Now on the top, again, the level of detail is quite insane. And remember earlier when I talked about the small wings? These air brakes, which will help in atmospheric flight, are 12 meters long. 12 meters. By the way, in the concept brochure this was described as a heat exhaust, but now it is clearly labelled as an air brake. While I make my way to the back, I noticed that the shape of this ship, especially in the back, from this angle, is way more similar to the Galaxy than I thought, and honestly I believe that these two now look a little too similar. The two silhouettes could be confused easily from a distance, which you could argue makes sense as it's the same manufacturer, but I still believe that this dynamic and also aggressive look works much better on the Polaris, which is shaped like a spear because it works like one. It's supposed to find an opening, get in, shoot its torpedoes to do a ton of damage, and then get out quickly. Whereas the Galaxy has a lot of industrial or even civilian use, so I think it should look more like a bigger Connie than this. But we are talking about the Polaris today, which looks great for what it is. When I saw the model for the first time, the surface in the back there stood out to me. It looked almost like shutters that could open, but that again just seems to be decorational. I went to the top here for two reasons. One, I feel that the head of the ship almost looks like looking down the neck of a Bengal carrier. And then also the side with the wings here looks a bit like a giant version of the Sabre, but that might just be my imagination. Now, the top-facing hangar. It is big. 47 meters long and 33 meters wide. I'm not sure what to compare to. That is about the length of 2 tennis courts and the width of 3. We know it can hold a Scorpius, but just as with the hangar, I'm not really ready to try out and speculate what it could fit, because RSI ships in general, and this concept in particular, has very strongly tapered walls, so the actual landing pad will be a lot smaller. I'll just say that you can park 3 Gladius on the door itself. These are the last 2 man turrets I talked about earlier. Right here, these 4 hatches on each side are pretty much exactly where the concept had its escape pods, but these are not labeled in the model, and unlike all the other geometry like the wings, engines or cargo doors, these don't seem to be ready to be animated or to have any function. Make of that what you will. Right behind the cockpit we have these 2 massive retro thrusters that are a whopping 21 meters long, in case you need to brake really hard. And right next to it, some maneuvering thrusters. There are 18 of these modules throughout the ship with 2 thrusters each, so 36 in total depending on how you count. And let's talk about the cockpit last. That is my only complaint really. First of all, I think this elongated, less rounded cockpit does not look as good or as iconic as the concept did, but that might be my personal preference. What is not though, it is very exposed. Glass only basically, with very, very thin struts, if any. And that is good for visibility, and there's a shield protecting it, but this looks too open for me. It looks like a cockpit of an expedition ship like the Carrack or Galaxy. But then the Galaxy has this very narrow field of view for everyone but the frontmost 2 seats, while the rest is protected by these massive metal plates, and that is something that would make a lot more sense here. Look at the Hammerhead for example, how tanky that looks, and sure it fits a very different role, but apparently energy shields can't protect you from everything in this universe, so I would like to see something more military looking here. Or, as a compromise, blast shields, like for example the Drake Cutter has. So you could have a good overview, but then when you get in close to unleash your torpedoes, you could narrow down your visibility in exchange for more protection. And that is about it for this quick first look at the Polaris. I'm looking forward to rebuild the interior and do a tour like I did with the Galaxy, but looking at the size, that might take a while. I will publish more videos to show the remaining modules of the RSI Galaxy throughout Invictus, and if you haven't already, have a look at the Galaxy tour I did earlier. But now, thank you for watching, have a great launch week, and see you in the verse.